Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 25th annual Yachtapalooza event at Crowley's. Looks like the sun may be trying to come out, so hopefully. Today we're happy to welcome Rick Warner, owner and captain of the racing trimaran Areté. Last September, Rick and his crew were finally able to set a new world sailing speed record from Chicago to Mackinac Island, with a time of just over 12 hours and 30 minutes. But Rick and his team are united in an even more critical race. Corals worldwide are disappearing at alarming rates, and a world without corals will have a profound effect on our daily lives. Rick will explain why as he tells us more about the Coral Project and the Plant a Million Corals Foundation. Please welcome Rick Warner.
Thanks everybody for being here and listening to what we're going to talk about with Areté and our world record attempt. And also, as he mentioned, the Coral Project. And I'll explain how speed and scale relate to, wait till he gets that there. Is that better? How speed and scale relate to setting the world record, and also how we can save coral. Want me to step over here? That's good. All right, so first I want to say thanks to Grant Crowley and Crowley Marina. We staged here for 3 attempts at the world record, and going after objectives like this and setting a world speed record. You have to go into it as one of the challenges, knowing you will fail, and you will fail hard. And we'll talk about some of those failures and lessons learned for the challenge of setting the world record. So what I have up here is a representation of Areté. That's Harbor Springs when we were doing a practice run several years ago, upwind. We're probably doing about 25 knots there, about kind of cracking off into a reach right before a full wheelie. So that was quite a fun day. The graph on the left actually is a representation of the temperature change over history on planet Earth. And addressing the issues of climate change is one of my passions and one of the sponsoring organizations of Areté and our campaigns. So with that, let's pop to the next slide. Okay, so when you talk about speed and scale, if you're going to go after a world record or attempt to actually change the way the world actually is behaving relative to its climate, you got to move fast. We're out of time. And so with Areté, we can easily do 40 knots. Most of the time in the Great Lakes, our average speed in the races was running around 11 to 15 knots, mainly because of light air conditions, but she still performed pretty well. So this is Areté with the previous owner's paint job. It was known as Sopra before I picked her up and brought her over from France. So we have speed. Let's go to the next slide. To give you the scale of the boat, and by the way, she's actually sitting on the hard over here in the corner. You want to go take a look. I'd be glad to show you anything if you want after the presentation. She has a 100-foot rig. She's 62 feet wide. She's 68 long with the sprit. And well, there's your 100-foot rig. So there's your scale. So in light air, we can haul. As a dear friend of mine said from Chicago Yacht Club, we're not a big yellow dump truck. There's no lead on this boat. So we really try and fly the boat. We'll get a picture of it later. We'll show you the foils. So since we're all really sailors here, we'll dive into the handling of the vessel now. So let's go to the next slide. So I'll play a few videos and I'll talk to them. So this was shot when we left Muskegon coming down to Chicago. We can play it now. And this is very light air, as you can see on the water. And very quickly, we'll crack off a little bit and we're up to 15 knots. So she handles pretty nicely. In here that's one of the lifting foils, where obviously those are up at this point because we don't have enough speed to fly the main hull. Those are all, just for reference, they're all Doyle Ice sails, pretty new suit. And we are now just cracking off. We're getting about 15 knots and about 8 knots, 9 knots of breeze, and the main hull is still dragging. So we'll let this pop through. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll take you through some of the, skip it again. You have to I'll show you some of the behavior so you can get a feel for the dynamics. So let's play this video. This is a picture of from the helm when you're just getting her to pop. And so right now the main hull is fully out of the water, probably doing about 25, 28. There she is. And we're doing, sorry, go ahead. On this condition, probably like 12, 15, maybe 15, 16 knots. But we'll play it again just to show you something here. Watch how she's flying nicely, moving the helm a lot, and then I push it over and she drops. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's play this one. Now we've done some trim changes, put Matt at the helm, and watch how she's doing the same thing, but he has less maneuvering of the tiller, and she's flying pretty nicely and stays pretty stable. So during the record run, that's the configuration we were in most of the time with two hulls out of the water. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll show you, this is the behavior of the vessel under sail. The foil down here is lifting, so the main hull's out, but the leeward ama is actually on the surface of the water. The rig is canted about 5 to 8 degrees to windward. Let's go to the next one. And this is under a configuration where she's slotted at the start of the record run. And you see the lifting, it's really not from the wave condition. We had too much foil down. So the leeward arm is actually lifting the whole boat and popping it up. So we actually brought the foil up a little bit because we couldn't quite get the main hull to fly at the start. You notice that the dagger is actually up in the downwind configuration. And that's a trim tab that can give us about 4 or 5 degrees upwind angle when we're really hauling upwind. So next slide. Okay, now we're gonna have a little bit of fun. So this is not Areté, but we don't have any video, so I'm gonna play this one. This is a 50-footer sister ship, new configuration. And this is Montre Jacques. It's like there's Domino's Pizza in France. So let's play it. And I'll have to talk over for a minute until we can skip. There's gonna be a lot of French babble here. This is a promo video for them, but it'll show you some interesting dynamics of what it was like when we were actually doing the record run. So pretty soon, let's scroll down and see if we have enough loaded yet to move it forward to the sailing. They're basically saying, we're gonna go out here and try and crash the boat. So that's the skipper. This was a few years ago. So this boat is 10 feet shorter, very similar configuration, except no lifting foils. And I believe they don't cant the rig also. So you'll see some behavior on the leeward ama when she's under pressure that we can avoid with Areté with the lifting foils. Can possibly just can't get there yet? Yeah, we're gonna get there pretty quick. So they're heading out of harbor. Very similar winch configuration. These boats were designed to actually sail with 1 or 2 people from France to Guadeloupe. And so they're double handing today. You actually see a moment when they're sailing this where they're both grinding and the autopilot's sailing the boat and there's only one hull in the water. So we're getting ready, tiller configuration like Areté. Now he's talking about buy my pizza. So we'll skip here pretty quick. So they have, on this boat's interesting, they have a center tiller, so they can be in there both working it and then adjust the boat quickly without having to go to the helms. So now these were similar wind conditions to when we were doing the record run. This is an upwind configuration with a trimaran. You see how she pops out of the water. You can see a lot of flexing on the vessel actually. But if you watch the leeward ama, it really gets pressured and it's diving down quite a bit. But that's a mode you get used to when you start sailing these boats. So it's ideally you want to have the main hull about a foot out of the water, so there's no drag. You don't want it much higher. And so you can turn the volume up a little bit if it's possible. It's good music. Let's go ahead and ask any questions if you want while we're looking at it. So that behavior where she's that's because of the sea state they were in. We did not have that kind of sea state. In fact, we'll talk about, we really tried to get southeasterlies for the record run so we could be on flat water. So we didn't have that hobby horsing going on. So once you get used to this, you kind of get used to this behavior. I'll tell you, 2 of the crew members on the record run got seasick, and they were monohull sailors. So trimaran sailing is a washing machine behavior, which you have to get used to. It's a little different. But now, again, you watch they have a lot of float capability here, but they're also reefed down. I think they have 1 reef. They're on the 2. They have a 3 head sails up here like we have on Areté, but we have an 8-foot sprit. And pretty quick here, they're going to go to a downwind mode. And I want you to see that because when we did the record run, we had, I can't actually have the hard number, but it's called stuffing it. And we stuffed her about 15 times. And so here you go. They've clearly overpowered the head sail. See the leeward arm pressing and stuff. Okay, blow the head sail, drop it. No, we didn't stuff her that hard because that's not the way you move forward fast. We dropped the head sail quicker and brought it back. Now they're looking for probably a good scotch. So, all right, let's move forward. So now I've kind of given you the dynamic of the vessel of speed and scale. I mean, so yeah, go ahead. Absolutely. In fact, the Orma's, so the Orma class is 60 by 60 box rule, right? 100-foot rig. There were probably 30 or so made of them. There's only like 4 or 5 left because they've been wrecked. Okay, and they are overpowered. So they came out with a new class called the Mod 70s, which are the same rig, 10 feet longer to avoid pitch poling. And in fact, Areté was designed by Mark Lombard with a lifting foil. And the intent of that was actually to stop pitch poling, to get the bow to surface. But what then they learned is you could fly the main hull, and that gave them a lot of speed. So that they do that. The Mod 70s actually started going over sideways because they made them narrower. So let's go to the next slide. So some key takeaways and challenges we face going for a world record is, I'm a big fan of John Dorn's venture capital activities and OKRs, objectives and key results. So we organized the attempt, and let me back up. So we brought the boat over here from France to go after the Royano Trophy and several other race course records, which we achieved. So in 17, we said, what's our new challenge and how could we create more awareness for the Coral Project at the time, sponsored by Coastal 8. And so we said, well, let's go race against time. And so a lot of people aren't familiar, and I'll brief you on that, and we'll get into it. The WSSRC is a group out of England that tracks 79 race courses around the world, and the fastest time they were ever done in history. And so you can register with them on a given race course. And then what you do is you have a 12-month window to pick the weather window and try and do that course as fast as possible. So when you do the run, you are actually racing against the best time ever on that course, as well as all the other races in the world. So it creates quite a dynamic and a challenge that you have to get everything absolutely right. So with that, we learned, we had to set the key measurable goals that we were after. You have to know how to sail it. You have to know the processes. You have to know the dynamics. And then you have to know that you will fail. So we tried 2 times before this. We actually knew there was a tight weather window in the first shot. We got near Harbor Springs. We had to bail out. We ended up breaking the mast. The second time we tried it, we were on rum line doing about 28. Figure we had it nailed, maybe 1 jibe the whole way to Mackinac. We were lucky. The rudder post came out. We sank in the middle of the lake. Sinking on a trimaran means you go to stasis. Doesn't mean you sink, but the coasties had to help us in the whole 9 yards. So then we came back, we did a full refit on the vessel, and we took a shot last year and we got it. So you will fail, and you will fail hard. She's sitting right over there. Yeah, no, we actually, the irony of it is she flooded to stasis, and then we, by the time the coasties got to us off of Waukegan, we had started to head downwind right towards St. Joe, which we've been in before. And by the time we got to St. Joe, we actually had the rudder back up in the vessel, and we docked under our own power, although the hull was full of water. So yeah, we did. No, in this case, kind of like going after climate change or trying to improve the environments we live in, most people don't want to hear about it and won't understand what you're trying to achieve. And it's going to take speed and scale. So let's pop to the next one. All right, so this is an eye chart. Everybody got it? So these are and we can zoom in. He's going to do it here for a minute. This is from that website, World Speed Sailing. And this is the fastest average speed. And you will notice that most of the countries or people on here are French. The French are some of the best in the world at speed sailing, especially in multi-hull sailing. And Chicago to Mac race was held originally, that record, by Fawcett with Stars and Stripes. And then Peter Thornton took it a few years back with Il Mostro. So the multi-hulls, they always start last in the Mac, and we've seen up to 10. I think it's dropped off quite a bit in the last few years. So I think 3 or 4 started last year, if I'm right, roughly. So I'll say something else. We'll get to the team a little bit later, and don't let me forget, I want to talk about the nature of Michigan sailors and the Great Lakes sailors and knowing multi-hulls. It's a lot like ice boating, the way it behaves. So gist of it is, now the Chicago Mac race is ranked 15th, and there are no other, all the other boats that are faster in a record run are 70-foot or 100-foot versions of trimarans. So that boat over there is now the fastest Orma 60 in the world. So according to these records. So let's go next one. Come out of this. So to pull this off, it takes the right weather and a lot of patience. Okay. So what we looked for was flat winds, building and clocking. So we wanted south-southeast so that it was breaking off of the Michigan shore. So we launched off of Chicago, and you'll see our track, and we headed up towards Michigan as best we could. Not too tight because we wanted to minimize the jibes. I think we ended up putting in 3 jibes in the record run. So with the flat water, we don't have that hobby horsing, and we can just keep the main hull up and maintain rapid speeds. I think our top speed was 35, and we were only in winds of 10 to 15, which we, no, 15 to 20 actually. And so let me talk a minute about what it takes as far as patience. I'd say for that 12 hours of sailing, there were probably 100+ hours of effort per hour beforehand. A lot of weather analysis. We worked with commanders, sail flow. We got into a routine of red, yellow, green. So when the weather window opened up, we basically would every day have a report of red, no go, yellow, maybe it might happen if certain things line up, and green the day of. So the crew was all local, and we did this actually Corinthian style with no professionals, which most of the other records are fully professional paid crews. So let's move to the next one. So the crew, so Matt Graham, U of M, he was our navigator for the whole program. James, a lot of people from Muskegon and Chicago. A lot of them were from the Natalie J crew. To my benefit, they broke the mast in the Port Huron Mac race, so they were available. So, and it's great. We had Brian Torreson on board. John Holson, if you don't know him, he's one of the best composite laminators in the world practically, and he happens to be in Muskegon. So when we break things, we could fix them quickly. So we did it all with locals, which is a lot of fun. So, and again, as I was saying, some people asked me outside of this area, how could you bring a boat from France, multi-hull, and think you're going to go after, have the talent to do these things? Well, there's offshore spars here, there's Crowley's, there's Torreson, there's West Systems, and a lot of multi-hull experience due to trimaran, trimaran and ice boating. Very similar behavior. You are always sailing upwind in your brain practically. So because you are sailing faster than the speed of the wind. So let's pop to the next one. So we had the right team. So we did it. We came off the shore. This is from Ziggy's watch. I could have pulled it from the B&G system, but he just sent these to me. It's pretty easy to show you. So we, one jibe, hitch out, another one, hitch out. Basically just started cracking off because we got the wind to come around with us up through Grays, and we sent it and the wind stayed strong. So that was always a concern in this because some of the other world records are around the world. So that's a different challenge to predict the weather around the world. But we had to find a 12-hour window. The record was 18 or just about 19 hours. The Moster took it down to 18 hours, 17 something. And when we looked at it, because we wanted to raise the status in the overall records, we were shooting for 11 to 12 hours. We ended up with 12 and a half. So here comes Grant. So this is the course. Our average speed was 24.73 according to Ziggy, which put us at actually 12th in the world. But the actual measurement that took place, I think we actually, it's been debatable, started a little further back. So our average speed was a few points lower. So it put us at 15, but we'll take it because we crushed the record.
Your finish line was exactly the same finish line as Chicago Mackinac, under the bridge, short distance. That was your finish line, right?
Yeah, you have to run the actual course, and it has to be officially started by, again, shout out to Chicago Yacht Club. They have to set the start, and we have to organize a finish, and the day we pick it. And there were several, false starts. There were several times where we got out there and said, nope, it's not right. We're stopping. So once you start, you can actually abort within the 12-hour window before the finish line. But then you got to sail all the way back and wait for another window. That's the way the rules work. So, yeah, so it's a 34.6 knots with our max speed in the run. So let's pop the next one. All right, so now we talked about Areté and speed and the scale and challenges. Take a minute and talk about my passion of addressing climate change. So as I said, I'm a big fan of John Doerr, and he's published a great book. I recommend everybody read it. It's called Speed and Scale, and it's about what we can do to make the world a better place as a world, actually. So he talks about the macro level, and he says we got to do speed up and scale up, or we are in deep trouble, a real existential problem. Now, the Coral Project, as you know, is what we were promoting to begin with. What we learned is that, by selling bracelets and donating money to certain scientists has worked quite well, but it isn't enough. It's nowhere near enough. And people don't realize that 50% of the corals are now dead in the world. And I would say to each of you, take a breath, take another one. And that third or fourth breath comes from coral and how it behaves within the oceans of the world. So if the coral dies, our quality of life will die. So there's the dark side of my statement. So when you get into what we realize is we need to scale up and speed up our actions. By 2030, says the world will only warm by 1.5 degrees. So we are currently working with Coastal 8, my other organization, with several Caribbean islands to look at large capital investments into their infrastructures to make sure that the coral and marine life can continue to prosper. Yeah. So it's really interesting. When we first looked at coral, it was about temperature, the 1.5 C. But the reality is it has to do with the quality of the water at the same time, pH balance. So what we're looking at is investing in renewable energies, electrifying transportation, regenerative agriculture, and a blue economy marine science lab, which will actually foster discoveries from the biomasses and STEM education opportunities for people within the islands and the coastal communities. We'd love to do it in the States, but we found more interest in several of the Caribbean islands. So if you talk about the pH balance of the waters, keeping the water quality right, you have to address the water runoff. So the moving to electrification will help. And the bigger benefit will come from the rest of the world decarbonizing. obviously, but you have to do it within each community at a scale level. So every group has to do it, and we found a lot of interest in several, Caribbean islands. So, so the analogy I would put out there is, if you want to set a world record or change the way the world works, don't get on a T10, get on an Norma 60, and go for it the right way. So there you go. Any questions? All right. And if anybody wants to see the boat, it's right over here. I'm glad to show it to you. So.
Thank you, everybody, for attending sort of the seminar. More to see at Crowley's. So yeah, thanks. And season should be starting soon.